What did Tolkien mean by Gandalf dying? He staggered and fell and was gone. 8 words, one haunting death. But what if everything you've understood about that moment is incomplete? Buried in Tolkien's own letters is a perspective, one so rarely explored, it changes the way we see Gandalf's fate. When Tolkien described this scene, he was clear in his private correspondence. Gandalf really died and was changed. So Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced and returned. Not metaphor, not myth. Death, real and final, something Middle-earth had never known before. This isn't the story most fans have heard. For decades, many have overlooked the moment where Tolkien describes a unique, extraordinary intervention, where the divine for once acts openly. So, what truly happened when Gandalf fell? And why did Tolkien, by his own account, allow this rare breaking of his universe's rules? The answer reshapes everything we thought we knew. Are you ready? Think back to that moment in the movies, Gandalf's fingers slipping from the bridge of Khazad-dûm. It's a scene you don't forget, but Tolkien's words in the book give it even greater weight. In print, Gandalf's fight with the Balrog isn't just action. It's the echo of the world's first battles, fire and shadow, light and loss. The Fellowship's journey through Moria isn't just a risky path, it's a descent into the oldest darkness in Middle-earth. And Gandalf? He's more than a wise wizard with a staff. In Tolkien's world, Gandalf is a Maya, an ancient spirit in mortal form, a guide sent to help, not to rule. His wisdom runs deeper than any kingdom, his strength chosen for service, not show. Tolkien writes that the wizards were embodied in the form of men, but with greater endurance, wisdom, and powers. So as the Fellowship walks into darkness, Gandalf is walking towards something higher, toward a summit most will never see. If you look at any map, the story seems simple. The Fellowship descends into the mines, but beneath it all, Gandalf's true mission is rising, stretching up toward the edge of the impossible. His journey flows from the west, from Valinor, that shining land where silent powers watch over the world. Many retellings skip the cosmic side, but to truly understand Gandalf's story, you have to sense the great design beneath the surface. There's a rule that shapes everything. Gandalf and his kind are bound. The Valar sent them, but they aren't allowed to rule by fear or force. Tolkien set the rule plainly. It was forbidden to them to match force with force, or to seek domination over elves or men by force and fear. So here's the question. If these great powers can only guide with gentle words and quiet wisdom, what does it mean when the greatest power intervenes directly? Why Gandalf? Why here, on the knife edge between hope and despair? Somewhere in the deep below Khazad-dûm, as stone shivers and shadows swirl, the answer waits. How does Tolkien describe death? When Boromir dies, he did not move or speak again. His breath came no more. That's final. For Gandalf, though, he staggered and fell and was gone. Absence, not quite an ending. Even Sauron, after his first defeat, is described as, "He is not dead, but sleepeth." These aren't throwaway words. Tolkien, a professor of language, chose them with surgical care. The absence of finality in Gandalf's death is deliberate, and his transformation into Gandalf the White. It's a linguistic breadcrumb pointing to Tolkien's deepest beliefs about grace and the world's restoration. Feel the minimalist chill. With a terrible cry, the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. But even as it fell, it swung its whip, and the thongs lashed and curled about the wizard's knees, dragging him to the brink. He staggered and fell, grasped vainly at the stone, and slid into the abyss. "Fly, you fools!" he cried, and was gone. Ever had a moment in life when something ended with shocking abruptness? A breakup, a lost job, an opportunity that vanished in an instant. That sense of unfinished business, a story interrupted, is exactly what Tolkien wants you to feel. Gandalf's story wasn't over. It was violently interrupted, creating a void in the tale that demands resolution. It's hard to overstate what's at stake in this moment. Gandalf is more than a wise companion. He's the linchpin of hope for the free peoples. Without him, Aragorn's courage falters, Frodo's burden grows heavier, and the fragile alliances of elves, men, and dwarves could shatter. It's not just the fellowship that trembles. The future itself grows dimmer, as if a star were suddenly snuffed from the sky. For Tolkien, whose stories are so often haunted by the threat of ultimate defeat, Gandalf's fall is the moment the world comes closest to irreparable loss. There's an echo here of older myths, Merlin vanishing in the forest, Odin hanging on Yggdrasil, even Christ's descent into death. But Tolkien isn't copying, he's daring something even bolder. He asks, what happens when hope itself is thrown into the abyss? Imagine if Gandalf had truly perished. Middle-earth would lose not just a wizard, but its living link to the divine, like a world cut off from hope. But Tolkien's world makes room for something remarkable: direct divine intervention. At the moment of greatest need, this leads to the big puzzle. If Gandalf truly died, what happened to him in that mysterious void? The answer challenges everything you think you know about Middle-earth's cosmology. To understand Gandalf's death, let's walk his journey. On January 15th, Gandalf falls with the Balrog into the blackness beneath Moria. For 10 days, he battles this ancient demon, climbing from the nethermost caves to the snowy peak of Zirak-Sigil, Silvertine, the summit Gimli reveres. On January 25th, he finally defeats the Balrog. But those 10 days are more than a footnote. Imagine them in cinematic detail, not mere hours, but a relentless struggle in utter darkness, where time itself seems to blur and the roots of the world twist in shadow. Picture Gandalf and the Balrog locked in battle, tumbling through endless caverns older than memory, past ancient bones and primordial fire. It's a conflict as much cosmic as it is physical, a faint echo of the original wars of light and darkness that fill the oldest tales. Every moment is endurance, not just for Gandalf, but for goodness itself. The Balrog is more than a monster. It's the echo of Melkor's first rebellion, evil that refuses to die quietly. Gandalf's ordeal is a reminder. In Middle-earth, darkness doesn't vanish with a single blow. It returns, deeper, and must be faced again and again. Then, after the final clash atop Zirak-Sigil, darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time. Naked, I was sent back, for a brief time, until my task is done. Not I returned, not I found my way back. I was sent back. This phrase is a seismic shift in Tolkien's legendarium. The rules have always been clear. The Valar can guide, can counsel, but they cannot interfere so directly. For the first and only time in the Third Age, the hand of Eru Ilúvatar reaches in, not as a whisper or a riddle, but as a decisive act. As one great Tolkien scholar observes, this passive phrasing, "I was sent back," is a deliberate marker of something higher at work. We all know the difference between earning a comeback and being given one, like a life unexpectedly saved, or a hope rekindled against all odds. Gandalf's return is pure grace, a rescue from outside the story. For Tolkien, the idea of grace, unearned, unexpected, and utterly transformative, is both comfort and challenge. Gandalf's resurrection is grace in action, a gift neither he nor Middle-earth could demand, breaking in at the darkest hour. Here's the crucial detail. The wizards were originally sent by the Valar, Middle-earth's angelic guardians, who set strict rules, guide, never dominate. Only Eru, the one above all, could override those cosmic laws. When Gandalf comes back, it's not just another miracle. It's the creator himself, stepping into the story, recommissioning his servant. Tolkien puts it plainly. He was sent back by authorities, the one who is above all authorities. In all the history of Middle-earth's Third Age, this kind of direct intervention happens almost never, and it changes Gandalf, not just reviving him, but transforming him at the core. Gandalf isn't simply restored, he's remade. The clue is in the change from grey to white. When his friends meet him again in Fangorn, his hair was white as snow in the sunshine, and gleaming white was his robe. The eyes under his deep brows were bright, piercing as the rays of the sun. This dazzling whiteness isn't just a costume change. In Tolkien's world, it's a symbol of renewed authority, spiritual purification, almost like a baptism. Gandalf himself speaks of passing through fire and deep water. In myth and faith traditions, those are the elements of cleansing and rebirth. Have you ever met someone who's truly survived a brush with death, an accident, illness, trauma? Outwardly, they're the same, but something's changed. A new light in the eyes, a new depth to their presence. Gandalf's transformation is that, on a mythic scale. The Fellowship doesn't just regain a leader, they receive a messenger who's glimpsed the farthest shore. Consider the mythic weight of this change. Gandalf the Grey, known for humility and quiet wisdom, is transformed into Gandalf the White, a figure dazzling and awe-inspiring, yet burdened with greater responsibility. It's not a promotion he sought, but one he receives only through sacrifice. This is Tolkien's recurring theme, a sudden miraculous turn toward joy at the very edge of despair. Gandalf's transformation is not just a recovery, it's the world's answer to loss, the first faint sunrise after the longest night. Tolkien clarifies, he was enhanced in power as a created person, but his wisdom, perception, and benevolence were greater. It's not about leveling up his magic, it's about deeper wisdom and new authority. Contemporary readers, used to upgrades and power boosts, often miss that distinction. And for the Fellowship, meeting Gandalf again is more than a reunion. It's a shock of hope, a sign of what redemption in Middle-earth might look like, not erasing the scars of darkness, but letting light return all the brighter for having been lost. When Gandalf rejoins his friends, he conceals his identity at first, not as a trick, but because he's processing an encounter with the divine that words can't easily convey. Who hasn't struggled to explain a transformative experience? Before the Fall, Saruman was the top wizard, head of the White Council. Gandalf was just the Grey Pilgrim. But now, after the Creator's intervention, the hierarchy flips. Gandalf, faithful in sacrifice, is promoted above Saruman, whose own authority was corrupted by pride. It's a lesson. In Tolkien's world, true authority is granted not by ambition or domination, but by self-giving sacrifice. Gandalf rises, not because he grasped for power, but because he gave himself for others. Think of any moment in your own life when new responsibility landed on you, not through striving, but through being tested and found faithful. Multiply that by a mythic scale, and you have Gandalf's new calling. The Balrog battle is both a physical and spiritual trial. Tolkien writes, the wizards had failed, or if you like, the crisis had become too grave and needed an enhancement of power. Most readings stop at the surface, missing this. Gandalf's transformation is the Third Age's most direct act of Eru Ilúvatar in the story. Where the divine usually acts in whispers and shadows, Here the creator literally sends Gandalf back to push back the darkness. So when Gandalf confronts Saruman, "I am Gandalf the White, who has returned from death," he speaks with the full weight of the author's authority, not just a character arc, a cosmic rebalancing. For the close reader, there are hints throughout the Legendarium that Gandalf's journey is unique. The Silmarillion, with its tales of heroes and gods, rarely depicts intervention so direct. Even the greatest elves and men, from Feanor to Luthien, face their fates with only glimpses of grace. Gandalf's return is an anomaly, a rare, deliberate act by Tolkien to show that sometimes the rules can be rewritten in service of hope. And perhaps that's the deepest magic of all. Not the power to dominate or destroy, but the willingness to sacrifice and to be transformed for the sake of others. What then does all this mean? Not just for Gandalf, not just for Middle-earth, but for the underlying architecture of Tolkien's mythology, and, by subtle extension, the fragile mythologies by which we steer our own lives. Tolkien, whose every sentence is a palimpsest of deep reading and deeper feeling, does not leave us adrift. He names the pattern with the clarity of someone who has known the trenches of sorrow and the rarefied air of hope. Gandalf really died and was changed. The wizards, as such, had failed. Or if you like, the crisis had become too grave and needed an enhancement of power. So Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced and returned. Here, for those whose worldview is shaped by the echo of old liturgies, the pattern is familiar: sacrifice, loss, descent into the unthinkable, and then, by some grace that logic cannot account for, a return, transfigured. But even for the secular reader, even for the reader whose faith is only in story itself, there is something elemental here. Tolkien's world does not allow despair to ossify into certainty. At the nadir, when hope is exiled, and every narrative seems to have spent itself, something astonishing occurs, not by merit, not by calculation, but by the sheer, incalculable generosity of the cosmos. Grace, that word so often stripped of its meaning, comes surging in, unheralded, unwarranted, reweaving the fabric of fate. The chronicles of the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings record only a handful of such interventions: the ruin of Númenor, the reshaping of the world, and now, this wild, luminous moment on the peak of Xeraxagil, where all the rules bend toward mercy and a wizard is sent back, not as he was, but as he is needed to be. Each of these, Tolkien reminds us, is a eucatastrophe, a sudden and miraculous grace, never to be counted on to recur. Gandalf's return, then, is not the sleight of hand of lesser storytelling. It is not the neat undoing of loss, nor the denial of suffering's claim on the world. It is, instead, Tolkien's most extravagant act of trust, in story, in readers, in the possibility that the universe itself might, in its rarest moments, conspire to let in the light. To read this is to be reminded that no night is endless, that the laws which hem us in may, at the hour of utmost need, become porous to grace, that despair is not the final architecture of reality, that hope, like light, travels farther than we think. Perhaps this is Tolkien's quietest and most radical gift, to suggest that even the deepest abyss is not beyond transformation, that every fall contains, folded within it, the blueprint for resurrection. Why does this matter? Because Gandalf's return is Tolkien's answer to darkness. He knew real war, real loss. He wrote to his son, "What a dreadful, fear-darkened, sorrow-laden world we live in. But there is still something to do." Gandalf's resurrection is no trick. It's the fulcrum. Without him, the fellowship breaks. Theoden stays lost. Gondor falls. With him, hope lives. Step back. Gandalf's fall and return echo Middle-earth's own story. A plunge into shadow, a climb toward dawn. Tolkien called his work a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. Unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. But the lesson runs deeper than faith. After ruin, renewal. Even in the last hour, the day can turn. Picture Fangorn. 3 friends see a figure in white where only loss stood before. For a moment, hope feels impossible. Then it appears. That's why this moment lasts. Gandalf's return isn't escape, it's proof. Darkness is not the end. Sometimes what's lost returns, not as it was, but changed, bearing light from the dark. Gandalf says, "I am Gandalf the White, who has returned from death." He speaks to Middle-earth and to us. Tolkien wrote, "The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. Hold fast. Even the longest night breaks. Sometimes light finds you, changed but new, born from the dark.